You know, if it becomes a woke contest, then the Democrats lose on this.
Bill Maher has come out again, warning the Democrats not to follow the online social justice train. Now, Bill inhabits that minority space in the media of being both a liberal and staunchly anti-SJW, though it shouldn't be that big of a surprise, considering he used to host a show called Politically Incorrect. Now, while I don't agree with Bill on a lot of issues, and he does suffer from Trump derangement syndrome, he is 100% right here.
But I feel good about one thing. I feel like the theme I have been pounding for many years here, real liberals, the regular liberals, are not the same as the people who have anointed themselves as woke, has finally filtered into the mainstream. That's what we do here. We say things, and years later, they say them in the New York Times. And President Obama said, Democrats, he fears they are in a circular firing squad. But here's the New York Times. The Democratic electorate on Twitter is not the actual electorate. Thank you. Today's Democratic Party is increasingly perceived as dominated by the woke left wing, but the views of Democrats on social media often bear little resemblance to those of the wider Democratic electorate.
The article Bill's referring to in the New York Times is another very positive sign that maybe, finally, the regressive left problem is starting to be addressed by the mainstream. Now, the article brings up some very interesting stats. 53% of Democrats not on social media consider themselves moderate or conservative, so the majority, while 29% of Democrats on social media consider themselves moderate or conservative, a clear minority. So it's very likely that this woke regressive ideology that all the media companies and the corporations and the colleges are bowing down to is really a small but vocal minority. Which shouldn't be that surprising considering the stereotype of get woke, go broke. If the social justice crowd had any kind of majority, that wouldn't happen. 70% of Democrats not on social media say political correctness is a problem. A huge majority. And even 48% of Democrats on social media say it's a problem too. Now I blame Twitter for most of this, who have all these journalists directly interacting with each other, getting sucked into these echo chambers. This is compounded by the problem that who's more likely to engage on Twitter? Who's more likely to criticize and call out people? Why, it's going to be ideological extremists, people who have a strong emotional feeling to all this. So you have a disproportionate amount of regressive leftists on Twitter in the first place, and then an even bigger disproportionate amount of regressive leftists on Twitter shouting at journalists and corporations.
Local news is sort of hollowing out. People literally are just moving to Brooklyn. That's where all the journalism jobs are going. And so there's this sense the conversations that they're having with one another are the same as you see elsewhere. Gustavo Arellano, a great columnist for the LA Times, has observed that none of the dudes that you see, the Mexican guys who wear the actual cowboy hats and who work really hard for a living, none of them have ever used the word Latinx in their life.
Exactly.
And when they hear it, they're like, what the hell are we even talking about?
And you have to remember that Twitter is the first time in human history that journalists and corporations have such a direct line of communication with people. So the journalists and corporations just assume that all this Twitter noise means something, when in reality, it doesn't mean anything. In reality, most people on both sides don't like this authoritarian PC nonsense. Now, the article says a possible turning point for people realizing that the regressive left is unimportant is with Governor Ralph Northam, the guy who either dressed up in blackface or in a KKK outfit as a Halloween joke 35 years ago. And while the woke regressives attacked him and called on him to resign, not only did he not resign, he didn't even really apologize. And what happened? The majority of Democrats in the state said, they don't care. And the majority of black people in the state said, they don't care either. So as much as I loathe to admit it, maybe the Cernovics and the other people who have taken the right-wing SJW approach to trolling through liberals' past to find problematic things, maybe it actually worked. Maybe it's working in just making everyone get so sick and tired of all this nonsense. And when I say I'm against it, I mean in the Jordan Peterson way.
Well, having the right degenerate into identity politics does not seem to be a positive solution. So one of the things I would say is that, like, I understand why the identity politics that has been practiced so assiduously and so devastatingly by the left has been co-opted by the right. I understand that. But then here's what I would say to the people on the right who are playing that game. If you play the game of your enemies and you win their game. You don't win. That's not victory. You just become the most successful exponent of their pathology.
So maybe in this specific situation, the tactic actually worked. Now, I don't think this is the death blow by any means to SJW ideology, but I do think this is a good beginning. There's a light in the horizon in the distance. There's something to look forward to. This is a good sign. Some in the mainstream media are finally waking up. I mean, when you got the New York Times, when you got Obama speaking out against the regressive left, that means something. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Trump makes Twitter his bitch. And Twitter makes the Democrat candidates their bitch. That's what it looks like to me.